Welcome back to Faith Formation at Home. This week in the Gospel, Jesus gives us a bold challenge. We've got this cool story of the rich young man, or in this Gospel story, he's just called a man who ran up to Jesus. I take this man at his word, right? He thinks he is actually fulfilling all of the commandments as well as he can. But he has this internal nagging that there's still something missing. And so he asks Jesus, like, what else do I need to do? And so Jesus challenges him, right? He's keeping these commandments. So you remember the 10 commandments. The first 3 commandments deal with loving God. The second 7 deal with loving neighbor. And those are the ones that Jesus articulates for this guy. And he says, yeah, I'm doing that, but I feel empty. I feel like something is missing. Notice what Jesus does. He ups the ante. He challenges him to go even bolder, right? You're fulfilling all these commandments to love your neighbor? All right, now here's a bold challenge. Sell everything you own and give it to the poor. And now you'll really be loving your neighbor. Right, I think that's good advice for all of us. Jesus is suggesting to us, couples in your marriage when the relationship is just kind of like, we're just kind of moving along. We're not having a bad time. We're not having a great time. We're just kind of coexisting. Do something bold. Go on a fancy date. Right, when you feel like your spirituality is just kind of lackluster, you're not getting anything out of mass, you feel like prayer is a chore, do something bold, right? Try to read the entire Bible in a year. You feel like faith is boring. All right, pick a topic and study it deeply and find out something more interesting about it. All right, kids, you can do the same thing at school, right? Social studies, history is getting really boring. Find a figure in history that you're studying, in the period that you're studying right now, and read a biography on them. Or read the Wikipedia entry on them or something like that. Go deeper into the topic. Do something bold to wake yourself up, right? Because we all get that sense that this man felt like, yeah, I'm kind of doing it, but I feel like I'm missing something. I think Jesus challenges, all right, well, try something bold. Our Bible story this week for our little ones from the Jesus Storybook Bible is The Forgiving Prince. This is the story of Joseph from the end of the book of Genesis. Some of you may know the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? It takes a little bit of poetic license, but gets the story generally right. It's a story of Jacob's favored son, Joseph, who is sold into slavery, eventually ends up in Egypt, sold into slavery by his brothers, right? They were going to kill him. They decided let's sell him as a slave instead. Kids, could you imagine if your siblings sold you out like that? Maybe you feel like they do sometimes, right? They run and tell mom and dad the bad things that you've done, or they make up bad things about you and get you in trouble, right? Or maybe your friends do this or whatnot. Notice what Joseph does, though, right? He feels frustrated by that. Towards the end, he kind of has this interesting dialogue with his brothers and whatnot. But ultimately, what he does is he forgives them, right? He recognizes that what they intended for evil, God intended for good, and God used that to save all of his people from a famine, from no food, no water. They would have just completely died out. This story points ahead to another prince, Jesus, who's going to come, also be sold by his brothers for silver, right? He's going to kind of take on all that muck and dirt and grime, nail it to the cross, and then rise again to new life. So many interesting parallels between this story and the life of Jesus, right? We've got Joseph interpreting dreams in this story. In Jesus' own life, God speaks to Jesus' dad, Joseph, through a dream and tells him, yes, take Mary as your wife. Yes, this son is from heaven. Save them from Herod. Take them to Egypt, right? They go back to Egypt. There's an Egypt tie-in. It's almost like God was kind of warning us what was going to happen with this story. But it's a super interesting story about siblings forgiving each other at the heart of this story. Our catechism questions for older kids this week focus on what we would call divine providence, right? God our Father providing good things for us. So we call God Father because Jesus taught us to, and because by our baptism we are actually God's children. He literally adopts us as his children into his family. That's a cool concept to stop and think about, especially if you're adopted and you kind of know what that feels like, or as parents, if you've gone through the adoption process. God actually chooses us to be his children, and then he takes care of us. Right? Sometimes you don't feel like God is taking care of you or he's looking out for you or whatnot. It's interesting to think about this. If God ever forgot about you, you would cease to exist. So you exist right now because you are actively in the mind of God, in the mind and heart of God. God is actively thinking about you. He's working for your good, even though we often work against him. Right? And that's why there is bad stuff in the world, because we freely choose to go against God. And as C.S. Lewis once said, God pays us the intolerable compliment that he actually takes our freedom seriously. God could just swoop in and say, no, bad decision, we're not going to do that, we're not going to let you do that, won't let you go down that road. It's not what he does. He's a parent who allows us to experience the natural consequences of our choices, and then he works with us through those to try to bring about a greater good. And that's ultimately why there is still evil in the world, because I choose dumb things and the natural consequences are bad for me, but God is strong enough to take those bad consequences and use them for good. Sometimes I'll see that good, right? He might be teaching me a lesson in this life, strengthening me for some future thing that I'll be doing. Or I may not know what God is, the good might not be in my life. It might be for somebody else's benefit that I'll never see. But that's the strength of God. Not that he stops the bad stuff from happening, but that he can use the bad stuff to bring about an ultimate good.